Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We continue reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. We are on Canto 4, chapter 13. We are beginning chapter 13 today. Description of the descendants of Dhruva Maharaj. So we heard that how Narad Muni was glorifying Dhruva Maharaj because he was so happy that Dhruva Maharaj could go to Vaikuntha Lok in just one life. We also got the benediction that whoever hears the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj can get all the desires fulfilled, can go to the heavenly planets if we wish, or also get liberation, go back home, back to Godhead. So description of the descendants of Dhruva Maharaj, text 1. Sutta Vachan
Sutta Uvacha
Nishamya Kausharavinopavārnitam
Nishamya Kauchara
Vinovarnitam
Durvasya Vaikunthapadadirohanam
Dhruvasya Vaikunthapadadirohanam
Prarudha Bhagavati Adhokshaje
Prarudhabhavo Bhagavati Adhosaji
Prashtum Punastam Vidura Prachakrame
Prashtum Punastam Vidura Prachakrame.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Sutta Goswami, continuing to speak to all the rishis, headed by Shaunak, said, after hearing Maitreya Rishi describe Dhruva Maharaj's ascent to Lord Vishnu's abode, Vidur became very much enlightened in devotional emotion, and he inquired from Maitreya as follows. So the story of the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj was narrated to Vidur by Maitreya Muni, and now Maitreya and Vidur is asking further questions to Maitreya Muni. As evidence in the topics between Vidur and Maitreya, the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the devotees are so fascinating that neither the devotee who is describing them nor the devotee whose hearing is at all fatigued by the inquiries and answers. So this is the pure devotees. They take so much relish in hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord. Satatam Kirtayantam. They are always hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord because they're experiencing a bliss, the ananda, the happiness, that they don't want to stop. We can see also Sukadev Goswami, he spoke continuously for 7 days and 7 nights. And Parikshit Maharaj was hearing 7 days and 7 nights without stopping, no food, no water, no sleeping. And so it's not that they were feeling tortured, oh, I'm feeling so sleepy, but I still have to do it. That may be our position. But the pure devotees, they are just experiencing this bliss. Transcendental subject matter is so nice that no one becomes tired of hearing or speaking. Others who are not devotees may think, how can people devote so much time simply to talks of God? But devotees are never satisfied or satiated in hearing and speaking of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or about His devotees. So we can also relate like that, people we love, and we like to keep on talking about them, about whatever things they do. Oh, my son did this, or my daughter did this, or this son did this. We keep on talking. And similarly, the devotees, because they love Krishna so much, they want to continuously hear and speak about the topics of Krishna. And also about the devotees, because the devotees' topics is always related to topics of Krishna. And the devotees are relishing this loving relationship between the devotee and Krishna. The more they hear and talk, the more they become enthusiastic to hear. The chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra is simply the repetition of 3 words, Hare Krishna and Rama. But still, devotees can go on chanting this Hare Krishna mantra 24 hours a day without feeling fatigued. Yeah, it's true, if we chant some mundane sound, how much can we, we'll get tired of it. But because the Hare Krishna mantra is transcendental, it's coming from the spiritual world, Golokela Premadana Harinam Sankirtan. And so that's the reason one can chant it regularly. And there are devotees who chant it constantly, as Prabhupada is saying, 24 hours a day. Haridas Thakur, he was chanting almost the full day. Even the 6 Goswamis. Vidura Vachan.
Vidur Uvacha.
Ete Prachetaso Nama.
Kete Prachetaso Nama.
Kashyapatyani Suvrata.
Kashyapatnyani Subrata.
Kashyan Vav Ye Prakyata.
Kashyan Bhavaye Prakyata.
Kutra va Satram Asata.
Kutra va Satram Asata.
Vidur inquired from Maitreya, O greatly advanced devotee, who were the Prachetas? To which family did they belong? Whose sons were they? And where did they perform the great sacrifices? The great Narada singing in the previous chapter of 3 verses in the sacrificial arena of the Prachetas gave another impetus to Vidur to ask further questions. So we were hearing that Narad Muni was singing Dhruva Mahārāja's praise. But where was he? He was in the where the Prachetas were doing the sacrifice. So Narad Muni was there. So now Vidur is asking, okay, then who are the Prachetas? And where were they performing these sacrifices? Manye Mahābhagavatam.
Manye Mahābhagavatam.
Naradam Deva Darshanam.
Naradam Deva Darshanam.
Yena Prokta Kriya Yoga.
Yena Prokta Kriya Yoga.
Paricharya Vidir Hare.
Paricharya Vidir Hare.
Vidur continued, I know that the great sage Narad is the greatest of all devotees. He has compiled the Pancharatrika procedure of devotional service and has directly met the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There are 2 different ways of approaching the Supreme Lord. One is called Bhagavad Marg, or the way of Srimad Bhagavatam, and the other is called the Pancharatrika Vidhi. So this Pancharatrika Vidhi has been compiled by Narad Muni. So Prabhupada is explaining that there are 2 ways of approaching the Lord. One is Bhagavad Marg and the other is Pancharatrika Vidhi. The Bhagavad Marg is the marg of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now what is this Pancharatrika Vidhi? Pancharatrika Vidhi is the method of temple worship, and Bhagavad Vidhi is the system of 9 processes which begin with hearing and chanting. So Pancharatrika Vidhi is how to do deity worship the Lord in the temple. And the ISKCON temples, they follow this Pancharatrika Vidhi of worshipping the deities, of the rules and regulations that are followed in the temple. So the Bhagavad Gita is the 9 processes of devotional service, which begins by hearing and chanting. The Krishna consciousness movement accepts both processes simultaneously and thus enables one to make steady progress on the path of realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This Pancharatrika procedure was first introduced by the great sage Narad, as referred to here by Vedu. So Srila Prabhupada is pointing out that the Krishna consciousness movement, both the systems are followed. Pancharatrika Vidhi for the worship of the deities, as well as the Bhagavad Vidhi, hearing and chanting is continuously going on in the temples. And both of them are bona fide ways of approaching the Lord. Swadharma Shile Purusher
Swadharma Shile Purushe
Bhagavan Yagya Purushaha
Bhagavan Yagna Purushaha
Ijyamano Bhakti Mata
Ityamano Bhakti Mata
Naradene Vida Kila.
Naradene Rita Kila.
While all the prachetas were executing religious rituals and sacrificial ceremonies, and thus worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead for his satisfaction, the great sage Narad described the transcendental qualities of Dhruva Maharaj.
Hare Krishna,
Narad,
I understand what is prachetas.
prachetas, they are the personalities. That's what Vidur is asking now. Who are the prachetas? So we are going to hear who they are.
No, but what does it mean? Prachetas means?
Oh, they are prachetas. I think they were the sons of Rishabdev, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Mm.
Yeah. So we are going to hear about them. Yeah. So then Narad Muni is always glorifying the pastimes of the Lord. In this verse, we see that not only does he glorify the Lord, but he also likes to glorify the devotees of the Lord. So the devotees of the Lord, it's not that they're only glorifying the Lord only, but they're also glorifying the devotees. They understand that the devotees are very dear to the Lord and the Lord is very dear to the devotees. And that's the reason the devotees glorify both the Lord and the devotee. You can never separate the devotee from the Lord and the Lord from the devotee. It's a loving relationship. Like a baby from the mother. You cannot separate the baby from the mother. So the great sage Narad's mission is to broadcast the devotional service of the Lord. For this purpose, he has compiled the Narada Pancharatra, a directory of devotional service, so that devotees can always take information about how to execute devotional service and thus engage 24 hours a day in performing sacrifices for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this Narada Pancharatra, the Pancharitrika Vidhi, is compiled by Narad Muni. And he, because he's a great authority, he's engaged 24 hours a day in devotional service. So in this Narad Pancharatra, he is laying out how one can engage in devotional service, how one can dedicate 24 hours a day in the service of the Lord. And Prabhupada is saying that the ISKCON temples, they follow both the Pancharitrika Vidhi and also the Bhagavad Vidhi. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord has created 4 orders of social life, namely Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. In the Narad Pancharatra, it is very clearly described how each of the social orders can please the Supreme Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita 8:45, it is stated, Sve Sve Karmani Abhirata Samsiddhim Labhate Naraha. By executing one's prescribed duties, one can please the Supreme Lord. So Krishna is not saying that we should do the duty of another person. He is telling Arjuna, you are a Kshatriya, you do your own duty of fighting. Arjuna wanted to renounce the world. Krishna told him, no, you are a Kshatriya. You stand here and you fight. Well, do it for my pleasure. Similarly, Krishna has made these divisions, the different divisions, the different varnas and different ashrams. So for us to do our duty for the pleasure of Krishna. Execute one's prescribed duties for the pleasure of Krishna. In the Srimad Bhagavatam 1-13, also it is stated, Swanushthitasya dharmasya samsiddhir haritoshanam. The perfection of duty is to see that by discharging one's specific duties, one satisfies the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, what is the reason that we should be doing our duty? Is to satisfy Krishna. Krishna has created this whole society, the human society, the way the society functions. Well, at least the Vedic society. And so each and every member of the society is meant to act in a way to perform our own specific duty for the satisfaction of Krishna. When the Prachetas were performing sacrifices according to this direction, Narad Muni was satisfied to see these activities, and he also wanted to glorify Dhruva Maharaj in that sacrificial arena. So the Prachetas, they were performing sacrifice not for any material gain, but to satisfy Krishna, to satisfy the Supreme Lord. Yes. And so Narad Muni is satisfied by seeing this, and he's glorifying his disciple, Dhruva Maharaj. Yasta Devarshina Tatra.
Yasta Devarshina Tatra
Varnita Bhagavad Kathaha.
Varnita Bhagavad Katha
Mayam Shushrushavi Brahman.
Mayam Shushrushavi Brahman
Katsneya Chastum Arhasi.
Chastum Arhasi.
My dear Brahmana, how did Narad Muni glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead? And what pastimes were described in that meeting? I'm very eager to hear of them. Kindly explain fully about that glorification of the Lord. Srimad Bhagavatam is the record of Bhagavad Gita, topics about the pastimes of the Lord. What Vidur was anxious to hear from Maitreya, he can also hear 5,000 years later, provided we are very eager. So we are hearing the same. Yeah. It's the same what Vidur heard 5,000 years ago. This is the same Bhagavatam that we are hearing. And Prabhupada saying, provided we are eager. The eagerness, because Vidur is saying, I'm very eager to hear of the glorification of the Lord. So Prabhupada is pointing out that should also have this eagerness to hear about the pastimes of the Lord. Maitreya Vachan.
Maitreya Uvacha
Dhruvasya Chotkala Putra.
Dhruvasya Chotkala Putra.
Vasya Chotkala Putra
Pitari Prasthite Vanam.
Pitari Prasthite Vanam.
Prasthite Vanam
Sarvabhauma Shriyam Naichat.
Sarvabhaumam Shriyam Nesha.
Sarvabhauma Shriyam Naichat
Adhiraja Sanam Pitu.
Adhiraja
Asanam Pitu.
The great sage Maitreya replied, my dear Vidur, when Mahārāja Dhruva departed for the forest, his son Utkala did not desire to accept the opulent throne of his father, which was meant for the ruler of all the lands of this planet. So Dhruva Maharaj's son, Utkala, it seems he didn't want to become the king. Sajanmanopashantatma
Sajanmanopashantatma
Nisanga Samadarshanaha
Nisanga Samadarshana
Dadarsha Loke Vitatam
Tadarshaloke Vitadam
Atmanam Lokam Atmani.
Atmanam Lokam Atmani.
From his very birth, Utkala was fully satisfied and unattached to the world. He was equipoised, for he could see everything resting in the super soul and the super soul present in everyone's heart. So the symptoms and characteristics of Utkala, the son of Mahārāja Dhruva, are those of a Mahabhagavat. So he's Mahabhagavat, very, very advanced devotee, because from his birth he is having this, that he is able to see the Lord everywhere. It's only when the qualification to see the Lord everywhere is when a devotee has developed his love for Krishna. Then he can see Krishna everywhere. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 6.30, Yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mayi pashyati. A highly advanced devotee sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead everywhere. And he also sees everything resting in the Supreme. Everything resting in the Supreme, because everything belongs to Krishna. So a devotee understands this. It is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 9.4. Maya tada tatam idam sarvam jagat avyakta murtina. Lord Krishna is spread all over the universe in his impersonal feature. Everything is resting on him, but that does not mean that everything is he himself. Now, when we say God is omnipresent, God is everywhere, everything is resting on God, it doesn't mean that God has become everything. The way to understand is that everything is resting on God's energy. Everything is God's energy. But God, he himself is yet a person, separate from everything else. Everything is a part and parcel. It's the energy of Krishna. And because some people might think, oh, since God is spread everywhere, then God is no more. No, he's still there. He's still there. He's still a person. A highly advanced Mahabhagavat devotee sees in the spirit. He sees the same super soul Paramatma existing within everyone's heart, regardless of discrimination based on the different material forms of the living entities. So is it that the Paramatma in the heart of an animal is different than the Paramatma in the heart of a human being?
No.
It's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same Paramatma. Yeah. Doesn't matter what is the material body. Paramatma is the same. So the Mahabhagavat can see that. He sees everyone as part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Mahabhagavat, who experiences the Supreme Godhead's presence everywhere, is never missing from the sight of the Supreme Lord, nor is the Supreme Lord ever lost from his sight. This is possible only when one is advanced in love of Godhead. So this Mahabhagavat, this pure devotee, this Premi Bhakta, he is seeing the Lord everywhere. Everywhere he's seeing, because he can see that everything is a part of the Lord. Everything belongs to the Lord. So he's always remembering the Lord. And the Lord simultaneously is reciprocating. There's a loving relationship between the Lord and the devotee. So the devotee is seeing the Lord every moment, and the Lord is seeing the devotee every moment. He is never missing from the sight of the Supreme Lord. Even the Lord is seeing the devotee at every moment, and the devotee is seeing the Lord at every moment. So it's a very, very intimate, very sweet relationship between the devotee and the Lord. Are there any questions or comments? No? Then we'll stop here for today. Thank you so much for listening and joining in. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.